also you can record. So welcome everybody to Astrology Victoria. Tonight we have Gretchen HICKMOTT, who is going to present her awesome work on creative agility and intuitive development for astrologers. We invited her because we love to have people that have ideas about astrology that are not just basic things, but things that can be uh, helping people understand astrology or helping us grow in our understanding of astrology or ourselves or our psychology, like all of that. So Gretchen is like very, very, very into this, and she will give us a little bit about her background. And at the end of the talk, we'll have we'll just have Gretchen introduce herself. We'll have a Q&A, we'll have the presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A, or unless Gretchen wants to do it otherwise, so we can always have all your questions answered at the end. And also we do this by donations, or your kind donations are always welcome to support our speakers. And yes, we are Astrology Victoria, and we shall at the end we'll talk more about what we do and how you can follow us and be in touch with us. So thank you, Gretchen. Like, on to you. Yeah, today we don't have Dulcie. Unfortunately, it's the first time. Dulcie is my co-person in Astrology Victoria.
It's like partner crime.
I know, I miss Dulcie. So anyway, on to you, Gretchen, and your presentation. So if you would like to give us a little bit about your background so we know who we have tonight.
Yes, hello everyone, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Tatiana and Dulcie, who is out in a cabin right now, so I hear. So wonderful. It's a total pleasure and a delight for me to be here. So a little bit about me and about tonight's talk. So tonight's talk's going to be a little kind of Uranus, Neptune, and Mercury vibe. We're going to take a mythic approach to client session work using the concept of the medicine story narrative in partnership with astrology. I use this in my sessions every time I do a session, and I have for many years, and I just find it to be such a rich complement, the medicine story narrative to astrology, and astrology the medicine story narrative. So they are my partners in crime in my approach to session work. And so I'm going to share a little bit about the structure of what I do in a session and what a medicine story narrative is, and how you can begin engaging in creating those. So I'll take you through a short exercise and just get you to feel into, get a taster of what it is that I do when I am constructing those. And then we'll take a look at developing creative agility in your practice and in your life generally, because with astrological work, it is divination, right? We are having a chat with the universe, spirit, with the cosmos. And so we are opening to that space, and there is a co-creative element to that. And so to get practiced in letting that energy come in and move through you, to receive it, and to receive the symbolic language of it, and to allow your intuitive skills, your creativity, and then some of the structural pieces, right, like astrology and a few other counseling bits, to help to support you in putting together a session, whether it's just for yourself or your loved ones, right, or whether you're actually doing this with clients. Okay, so yes, we've all said hello. I just wanted to make sure that we personalized the kind of great void out there. But a little bit about me and how I got into doing this work to begin with. So I'm a counselor and a shamanic practitioner, an astrologer, an intuitive arts educator in Revelstoke, BC, lovely Revelstoke up here in the mountains in Canada. And I've been at this work for many years. I began in crisis counseling, suicide intervention, and sexual trauma counseling about 13 years ago. All the light stuff, compliments of my natal Pluto moon square. And so while much of my time is spent helping people through crisis and transformation processes, my first love is actually art and storytelling. And so I've been an artist for most of the last 40 years. And I do believe that attending to my creative process is really the thing that keeps me sane and also able to be helpful to other people in the work that I do. So I'm sort of a strange astrologer in that I'm always using astrology in partnership with creating medicine stories and, from the energetic impressions that I receive reading clients' energy. So sometimes I focus quite heavily on astrology, the astrology clients moving through. And at other times, the astrology does support work for the counseling and mythic narrative work that I do instead of headlining the session. I'd say my approach is highly creative, and I really try to stay away from a one-size-fits-all. I have a lot of different people that come to me for different reasons. Some people just straight up crisis counseling, and other people want to take a journey into the mythic and look at life from a multidimensional perspective and do more transpersonal style work. And I like to be able to be flexible and creative in those spaces. The other thing that I think is important is that anytime you're doing session work, what I find is that one, most people are coming in for a session because they're having some crisis. And I think that probably 1 in 3 people, really has some trauma going on that needs some TLC. And so, I think being able to be flexible and creative and to have a variety of tools that are appropriate for this person that's sitting in front of you is great. And so tonight, what I'm going to do is offer you something that is not astrological in nature, but is a really great support for your astrological work and wonderful for supporting yourself and just a really neat skill to have. So for me, and actually maybe it's time for slide number 2. I promised I would stay on my slides tonight. My slideshow game is weak, but I have tried to pull it up. I think this is actually the first slideshow I've probably ever made. Okay, so tonight we're going to be taking a look at medicinal myth narrative or the medicine story. And, essentially what this is reading a client's energy. And I'm going to show you a process for being able to do that. And taking a beyond literal look at what's going on by reading into the subtle energy of a person coming in for a session. And there are a lot of different benefits to doing this. So I always do a reading for a client before they come in. I read energy for about 40 minutes. And essentially I'm opening up some space, opening up sacred space, asking what would be really beneficial for this client to see and hear at this time. And then sit in receptive mode and take notes. It's a bit of like a meditative state that we go into, but I take notes, and what comes out is a series of imagery and commentary. And I love these. I love this so much because it's always it always reads like a story. It's open-ended. There are lots of different vantage points. In shamanic practice, we call this tracking the energy. And essentially what we're doing is checking in with the story of the energy as it's presenting itself. And from that, we can explore that with a client. And then I weave astrology into that reading. How is the chart, speaking about the context that this energy story is taking place in? What are the archetypal elements highlighted in the reading and this mythic narrative that's coming up? And because it's an interesting space, right? It's an unusual space to have somebody tell you the story of your energy using not you directly, but different characters and elements that are telling a story. It kind of shocks the consciousness a little bit. It opens up some space, right? We move beyond the literal and into the symbolic and into the mythic. So we're not seeing things just as they are, but what they symbolize, right? That's the symbolic. And then the mythic is, and what it's really about for us as a soul, and what we're learning through at this time, and what might be helpful, right? What is this really about on a higher level? And, so there are a lot of benefits to this, right? One, it allows us to sit just outside of the thing that we're in, right? When we're in a situation, when we're having difficulty, when we're in pain, when we're in crisis, we tend to be very tight, and there's not a lot of space, right? And the mind and emotions loop, right? And so we need to open up space, right? We need to open up space. And if we can sit just outside of the situation with representation of us, a representation of it, it allows us to be a witness, right? To see what's going on with us as a story. And it gives us just that little bit of space, a little bit of objectivity to shift around our perceptual states, to shift around the vantage points. And that opens up perspective, that opens up fresh perceptual space, right? And when we're there, right, we can breathe a little bit, and we can expand our range of motion, right? What are all of the options here? When we're tight, when we're having difficulty, when we're in crisis, when the brain is on trauma, it is not particularly good at solving problems. The creative functions are not working at their best. We are unable to see larger perspective and into the future as well as we can when we're not dealing with trauma, right? So the brain operates in a very different way when we've got some trauma going on. And that's, trauma with a capital T, trauma with a small t, right? And we all have a little bit of that going on, right? It's traumatic to be a human being, right? We live in a really complicated and messy world. And so, there are layers and layers and layers to the experience that we're having. And so the neat thing about these medicinal mythic narratives, these medicine stories, is that they can help us move through the layers. They can help us approach things that are difficult gently, sitting a little bit outside of it, in a less confrontational way, and where there's some room to move. And that does help us expand our range of motion. It helps us create options for engaging with the situation at hand. And the other thing that I love so much about a medicine story, right, a good narrative myth, is we remember it, right? So, and that's really important, actually, that quality of something being memorable, because everybody here has at least a little bit of an interest in astrology. And so we all know, right? It's like you could fill your house with all of the astrological information and texts and technical work, right? It can be so much information. And, in a session, I like a client to not be overwhelmed with information. Why? Because if somebody's coming in because they got stuff going on, usually when we have lots going on, it's busy, right? It's chaotic. There's that sense of there's too much. And so I don't want a client to leave overwhelmed with their head more full than when they came in. And so, it's tricky, right, to strike a balance in a session, especially when you're integrating astrological archetypal work. You want to introduce enough fresh information for a client, and you don't want to overload them with technical info, right? So, I know myself, I've had some wonderful readings. I've been very blessed with it. And I've also had readings in which it was just too much information. I couldn't integrate it all, right? And, anytime we're looking at a person's chart, there's more information than we could ever deal with in one session. And so that idea of being able to make some choices and then create something memorable, create a story of that energy that is portable, right? That is nourishing, that the client can take with them, right? We'll remember a good story, but we tend to forget large, complex sets of information. Okay, so that's a little bit about the narrative, but I'm going to read you one. I'm going to read you one of my clients' readings that everybody will easily be able to pick up what it's about. It's not abstract, and it'll really give you the flavor. So I will give everybody a taste of that in just a second. But before I do that, I'm just going to give you, a structure that I use and have used for many years. In my practice, this is how I structure a session. I find this to be a really sweet way to put a lot of different things together, and give the client something meaningful to walk out with. So the first things first is that I always do a pre-reading of the subtle energy using a simple process that I'm going to teach you tonight. So we'll walk through it, and then I will also have a PDF that Tatiana and Dulcie can send out to anybody who's interested, so that you can work with that process if you want to practice tuning in. And everyone is able to do this. Everyone can read subtle energy. You do not need to be a special intuitive or psychic. This is everyone's original language. And a basic example of this is, we can walk by somebody on the street and feel sadness and not know them and not have a conversation, but we can feel it. You're reading subtle energy, right? We all have probably had the experience of thinking about somebody that you love, and then they call you, right? So we're feeling into the subtle energy of other people all of the time. And so in a process, a tune-in process, we're just doing a focused, large segment of that, right, with a really particular focus and asking a specific question, sitting in receptive mode, receiving information. So I do a pre-reading of subtle energy using a really simple process. Then I create a mythic narrative. And this is an energy story. And again, you don't usually have to tweak too much after you do a good energy reading and then take really good notes. And it kind of writes itself. You'll find that if you work with this process over time, and that's really all that is required: practice, 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 focus, right, and a little enthusiasm for this work, and you will be off to the races and being able to do good energy readings. Okay, so pre-reading the subtle energy, creating a mythic narrative, that's the story piece. And then after I share that, I use astrology to provide a little context and then some further support for the reading, right? And I can pick out certain elements that I see in the chart that are so loudly speaking in the reading. And again, it's nice because I think it was in Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas, to wildly paraphrase, right? He spoke about, there's a danger in only using intuitive processes, and I agree with that, right? Because it's always a little bit subjective. And so when we take a look at the astrology, it gives us some anchoring points, right? It gives us something that is not particularly subjective. The chart is objective, right? The transits are objective, right? They speak of archetypal conversations that are happening very specifically. And then obviously there's a spectrum that those can play out on. But I like to use astrology to provide context and further support for a lot of reasons, right? One of my favorite reasons is that it's such a relief when you've got a bunch of tension going on, right? Like right now we've got this Mars, Uranus, Saturn T-square, like it's tense, And so when there's tension going on, when the chart is being lit up in strong, in challenging ways, it's nice to know we're not crazy, right? We take a look at the astrological weather and we see, there's a context for this. This is picking up pieces in my chart and it's asking me some questions about my life. And so using astrology to provide that grounding, that context, and then further support for the narrative is something that I do and something that I love very much. And as we mentioned, I don't want to overwhelm the client with too much information, which is tricky for me because I like to chat. And I'm really excited and nerdy about this information. But one of the things we have to remember as symbolic language practitioners, astrology in particular, is that often the clients that are coming in are not astrologers, right? So, we have to strike that balance between providing enough fresh information and not, they're up to their eyeballs in too much stuff to think about and process. The other thing that I like to do, and this is a really important piece because I like to ground the work into the body so that we have an embodiment, is to check in continually with the client about where issues sit in the body. Where do they sit in the body, right? So something coming up, the tension, anxiety of, X, Y, and Z of the thing that is presenting, where is that? Is it in the heart? And can we locate that and touch that space and give the physical a little bit of support as well? And we can do a variety of things, breathing into that space, tapping it, speaking to that, right? And if we know a little bit about the chakra system, that gives us further indications about further clarity around what's happening for that client and why. For example, I tap my heart. We know that the heart chakra is a space of unconditional love, right? That sense of belonging. And so this is a place, right, that when that is disrupted, right, the heart hurts, right? So if love leaves, if we feel left out, right, that sense of abandonment, those are things that happen in the heart, right? Grief, right? We hold that here. It's not the only place we can hold these things, but these energy centers, which may be a subject for another talk, and perhaps you've already done that with Astrology Victoria, but I think there is incredible value in learning the chakras, learning the chakra system, and continually checking in with your clients when you're talking about difficulties that are coming up in their chart or their readings. Where are you feeling this in your body, right? And making that connection can be so helpful, right? The somatic work of that. And then working gently with the body. And again, it doesn't have to be massage or any sort of complicated manipulation, but just simply tapping, right? That energy that's caught in the back of your throat and has been since you were a kid, right? Because you weren't allowed to speak or you were judged really harshly for it, right? Just tapping that space and giving a little bit of love. It can be amazing, right? How much we can discharge energy by simply paying attention to that part of the body, where it is, what it has to say, and giving it a little bit of love. And so then that brings me to the final piece, is what I'm looking for to provide a client in a session is connection and catharsis, more than lots of information or anything impressive or needing to solve anybody's problems, right? Is that connection, like somebody feels listened to, somebody feels as though they've been seen in an important way. And catharsis, right? And exhale. Oh my God, I have options, right? Oh my God, I can breathe easy. Oh my God, it's okay that I'm a little bit upset, right? The energetic context that I'm in is tricky right now. Oh my gosh, right? I have choices that I didn't see before, right? It doesn't have to be a big catharsis, but a little bit of relief, right? Some connection and a little bit of relief. So those are the things that I am looking for in a session. This is my session recipe. If you find it useful, great, right? If there's anything in there that you want to pull out. Okay, so I'm on my slides. We did that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you a demo of a reading. All right. And then I'm going to explain a little bit about what was going on for that person. I won't pull the chart just because of time tonight, but the elements might seem really clear to you, the astrological elements at play. And this was a case in which they were very clear. But I'll do the medicine story, I'll do the mythic narrative, so you can get a little bit of a flavor for that and why that can be useful. I'll explain then after how you can open up that space, and then we'll do that really quickly, and then we'll move on into some other fun territory. Okay, So this was for a woman who came in a few months ago, actually when Jupiter first came into Pisces, or it went to, sorry, not a few months ago. She came in when Jupiter ingressed into Pisces, and that was significant for her because that was lighting up her sun. It was connecting with her sun. It was connecting with her Venus, and it was opposing some things that might seem obvious here. And the square between Saturn and Uranus was highlighted. She also had Stellium and Capricorn and Pluto moving over Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, and her North Node. And so, again, lots of information, but just to give you a little bit of context. Okay. So we see a woman with a solar disc for a face. She's holding this in her hands, feeling the bright generative warmth of this flashing disc of artful light. She takes this away from her face, taking it off, even though it is a vital intrinsic aspect of herself. She unveils another face. This one looks like a domesticated boar, once wild, now concerned with householder duties, practicalities, creating foundational security. She seems much less comfortable with this face at this moment in the energy. We are particularly drawn to the way in which this face feels like a costume to her, as though the nose of the boar is not real, unable to use her instinctual sense of smell. She appears to feel sweaty, flushed cheeks. We notice some anxiety arising in her. As the heat continues to rise, she removes this face so she can breathe. Now we see a beautiful timber wolf face calling out to the crisp night air, calling out to the stars, her inner wild woman, her strong voice in the wild. Wolf is the teacher, the pathfinder, an independent seeker. Wolves call to the wild. These creatures are experts at balancing their independence with roles in the family and pack. They often go out on their own and return then after their time alone to play and engage with their families. They know how to be true individuals and part of the pack. The colors are vivid, a sense of deep resonance, a voice expressed, connected to the wilderness. That was this face. Under this face, she takes this face off and we see yet another, and we notice some weight on the shoulders that have to hold up the neck as it supports all of these faces. This next face is a merchant mask, a large charismatic smile and a hat with dollar signs on it. The woman scratches at this face. Under it, it feels itchy, light, but unbreathable, like a plastic Halloween mask. Now we see the woman lay out all of the faces in front of her on the ground. She's biting her nails as she sees them side by side in this way. A sense of overwhelm, the demands of these various roles that seem to require contrasting parts of her all at once. No space for all of these to exist happily. She looks at a clock. Then she looks at a wristwatch and she is wearing, and this causes her to sweat. Now we see a magpie that flies into the scene to assist her and comfort her. The magpie takes her watch and stomps on it until it breaks, springs flying everywhere. She laughs and cheers. Magpie takes the clock out of the air and hurls it like a frisbee. At this, she stands up and cheers, whistles, hoots in relief. Magpie, who is a trickster, tells her these pieces are a trickster mindset. These timepieces are a trickster mindset that is bullying her with time pressure. Magpie says, you get to decide what time is to you and what to do with it. You get to use it like paint, like sculpting, like music. The moments in time can be made as long as you need. The magpie grabs some purple paint, offers her some paintbrushes, and they paint together. They paint the sky, a nice lavender color, the color of the crown chakra, releasing pressure from the head, opening space and creative channels to receive and commune with the celestial muses. Energy flows out from our hands, the part of the body that agrees to have, to hold. What we give, what we take happens in the hands, what we agree to. She feels some choice about these faces, these identities. She is not required to choose all of them. Magpie asks her, which of these faces feel like yours? Give yourself whatever time you need with this. Let yourself pick up only those that are yours. The others can be picked up later if necessary. The magpie shapeshifts into a hummingbird and turns off the fight flight switch in her heart. And she is able to exhale, a big, long exhale. Finally, we see our heroine turning the pages of a book, finding a fresh sheet to begin. She begins writing the next chapter from a place of true choice. After exploring where her choice function has been disrupted, she closes her eyes and begins. Okay, so this is a medicine story. This is a mythic narrative that was done for a client, and what she was struggling with, as you may guess, I use this because it's quite obvious, is that she was really struggling with feeling time, like the biological clock ticking, all of these expectations and roles that she was trying to do at once, the responsibilities and pressures of family and partner and to start a family, and and she wasn't ready, and she was feeling really bullied by time. And in addition to that, Jupiter moving into Pisces and on her Sun and her Venus, she's an artist. And this part of her, which has been neglected because she's been too busy, is just the needs of this becoming huge and undeniable for her, and that being a big squeeze for her. So, this narrative was really useful for her, one, in recognizing what she was contending with, to be able to sit outside of it. It's memorable, right? There's lots of rich imagery. It's playful. There's some catharsis in it. She has the helper bird, the trickster, to come in and mess with the clocks, right? And all of these elements allow us to play with reality, right? And the perceived limitations that we have going on, and just create a little bit of extra space to move around. And so, I won't pull up her chart. I didn't prepare that, but the astrological elements were really clear in the chart, and what was getting pushed on for her. And so I focused on, in her astrology reading, I focused on what this reading was speaking of. And for her, in fact, that was the biggest stuff that was going on in her life. So, the other piece that's interesting and important, right, that we all have to, the decision-making processes that we have to do in astrological work is, we don't want to waste time with a client on parts of their chart that might be interesting and might be juicy, but might not be the thing that is feeling really loud for them at the moment. And so a really good way around that is to just ask, right? What's feeling really big for you right now? And leaving some of the other elements out that, yeah, important, but maybe not the most important right now. And there's only so much time, and we don't want to overwhelm the client with too much information. So focusing on those pieces, not feeling like you got to attend to absolutely everything. Okay, let me just go. I think it's time for my next slide. All right, and all of the slides I'm showing you tonight, I think except for one, are things that I've made. I like to play around. I like to make stuff in the sand. I like to draw. These are all good representations of some of the art, but I've made plenty of bad art, and I'm gonna really suggest that everybody gets excited about making bad art, because that can be really helpful, right? Not worrying about being a good artist, but being concerned with creative play. Anyway, that's for a little bit later. So let's see, so the basics of attuning. How did I get that information? the first things first is the client comes in, I read this reading, and we get some tears, right? And that sense of, I feel like somebody understands what's going on. And again, not because I have a special skill, but because this is the energy that she's carrying, and we're just taking a peek at that. And she's asked for a reading, so she's asked for us, or for me to take a peek on her behalf. She loved the imagery, and I said, great, the imagery's yours. It's all your imagery. This is your story, right? So, and let's make meaning of this together. This is also something that we want to do. It's important when with the client in a client session that we are not jumping to assumptions about what certain things mean, how they're expressing their astrological chart, you know, what it is that the elements of the story mean to her. I had my ideas about what that reading might be about, but I always make space for it to be about something completely different. I've learned over the years, you know, you do reading, you're like, I know what this is about. And then you present that to the client. And I always hold off and I'm like, you know, where is that landing for you? What is that about, right? How are you relating to this imagery? And off they go to the races, right? So this concept of collaboratively doing meaning making of these mythic narratives with your clients, really helpful, right? And if you're reading for yourself, allowing yourself to sit with the imagery that you get in this method that I'm going to show you how to do, and making meaning. And the neat thing about these stories is that they can stay with us over time, you know, like a good piece of fiction or a good poem that means something different to us at different stages in our life, depending on what we have going on. Okay, so next slide. Tuning in. All right. So how did I do that? How did I get all that information? All right. It's very, very simple, and everyone is capable of doing it. So essentially the tune-in process is I'm doing a particular thing. I'm grounding my energy in a particular way. I'm opening up the crown chakra in a particular way. I'm asking for the space to be contained. And then I'm asking a question. Okay, so essentially the steps of a tune-in process, oh, that's a fun one, a trip to the mythic. That's what we are doing when we are doing these readings and taking a journey, you know, going through some unusual doors, and by getting out of the literal and into the mythic and into the symbolic, we provide space for whatever is going on to be related to in different ways, right? To get out of that tightness, to get out of the loops of the mind and the emotions. Okay, oh, I'm gonna let somebody else in, there we go. Okay, so collaborative meaning making. This is really important, both in astrology, and it's also really important in doing these readings. We want to be making meaning together. I'm a big fan of power sharing in sessions, right? Because there is, you know, I think traditional psychotherapy or any sort of therapeutic session work, right? There's a power differential, right? There's the person who's not having a hard time, right? Who knows a lot of stuff, who is, you know, standing in some expert space, and then the client is sitting in the not expert space, right? That's a traditional kind of power dynamic in a therapeutic session. I am not down with that. I believe that the client is their own best expert on their life, and I like to really honor that. I like to make meaning together. It's a lot more fun for clients, and it's empowering, right? That idea is that they get to decide what these imagery sets mean, what these stories mean. And then also in a chart, right, you can provide a few of the ingredients that you're seeing, and then you can allow the client to say, yeah, well, this is how that is for me. This is where I see that cropping up in my life. This is how that feels in my body, etc. Okay, so the astrological context, right? I think in that last reading, it was pretty, you know, we could see and probably guess that she had a little bit of action going on in her first house of identity, right? And she certainly did. And so you know, the astrological context is for her to not feel like she's just having this moment in time where she's bad at life, but that stuff is highlighting areas of identity for her. It's she also had stuff going on in her 5th house, right? And in her 7th house. So these concepts about relationships and herself as an artist and her need for creativity and space to play and space to choose, right? So I also think that the 5th house can, you know, can, for me anyway, can speak about choice, right? Because in our creative function, right, at the center of that is choice, right? At the center of that is choice. So it was easy to pick up those elements. It was easy to show her where those were happening for her in her chart. And that was helpful for her, right? That was helpful for her. And then the question is always, my God, when is this transit over? You know, which is always a bummer when it's like, well, it's 7 years. You know, so, but again, maybe a bummer, but also we can be prepared then, right? That sense of, okay, I'm with this for a while. I'm going to have some time to get to know this transit, and I have options here, right? And often when we get an ingress of a transit, that sense of options is not necessarily always there. If it's a tough ingress, it can just feel like, you know, a lot of difficulty. And so being able to provide, right, that information about, well, you'd probably be working with some of these themes over the next few years while Saturn's doing this stuff over here, etc. Right? And knowing that you can prepare yourself, you can allow yourself some time and some tools to really feel into this longer transit and make the most out of it and get the most benefit from it, and have this be supportive of your growth instead of suppressive of your growth, right? Okay, so yes, creative catharsis too. I always will include a little bit at the end of the reading if it doesn't come through, but it usually does, of some opening, right? Like, so here the creative catharsis, one, we see the magpie like smashing the clock, smashing the timepieces. And then we also see at the end, there's a fresh page being turned in the book, and she's writing, and she's able to write from a place of choice. And you know what? If you've been in a tight space, just feeling into that imagery is like, yeah, great. Smash the clock, right? Turn the page, right? Allow some fresh space to come. Okay, so a little creative catharsis. All right, so for a tune-in, we already did this. Okay, so these are the tuning and basics. The tuning and basics are creating sacred space. This is a really simple process. It doesn't need to take you more than a few moments. And most of you do some version of this anyway, probably. If you don't, it's a really good idea to. I don't ever do a reading or a session without creating some sacred space first. I clear my space. Creating sacred space means having an intent to step into service, clearing your space, letting your ego sit to the side as support, right? The ego at the minimum amount for the maximum effect, staying out of judgment. And so the creation of sacred space is I'm stepping into service. I might smudge my room with a little bit of smoke. You can use sage or Palo Santo. You can use rosemary. There's a lot of different alternatives if you don't want to use some of the endangered Palo Santo. And you know, there's some controversy around sage, as well as some indigenous groups that have asked that it not be used for commercial use. So, but there are a lot of things that you can make a smudge with. A whole variety. Rosemary is a really nice one, and it's easy. Cedar is really easy and available, smells wonderful. And so there's lots of alternatives, but essentially a little bit of smoke going around your room in a counterclockwise direction and just clearing the space. I clear the space of anything that is not of love, that is not of highest love, light, and wisdom and truth. Okay. And so again, that act is just setting the stage. It's getting your conscious, your subconscious, the spirit into an aligned space to do service. It's calming and it feels good to do this, right? It helps to set the difference between everything that has come before and you stepping into doing a reading. Okay. And preceding this is that if you're doing a tune in for yourself, this doesn't apply, but you never tune into another person without asking for permission, ever. Because it's the same as, like, in my mind, it's the same as getting into bed with somebody who has not invited you, right? It's a total invasion of somebody's privacy. So never do a reading for somebody unless you have received a direct request to do so. Yeah, and that also includes the caveat, but they don't know that they need me to tune into their energy. They probably need my help, but they aren't asking. If they haven't asked, you don't do a tune in. Okay, that's my soapbox. So we want to create sacred space. You want to just smudge your room, go around once or 3 times, whatever you feel like, until your room feels clear. A little bit of smoke and just the intention, I clear this space of anything that is not highest love, light, wisdom, vibration, and I welcome in everything that is. Okay, and then you're going to sit down. I sit down, I put on a pair of sunglasses because I like a little bit of sense deprivation when I'm doing a reading. I have a notebook in front of me and a pen, and I get really relaxed. And if I'm stressed out or anxious or worried about time, then I know that I'm not in sacred space. I'm not prepared to do a reading. So I need to get myself a little bit more calm. I need to take a few breaths. I need to get myself into a bit of an elevated state. And then I'm going to close my eyes, and I like to turn my closed eyes up to my third eye, and it gets very dark in there. And then I drop my energy, my roots. You can imagine the tree roots, feel your root chakra at the base of the spine. Your roots, just like trees, moving into the center of the earth. And into Gaia, into the center of Gaia. Why? Because we live here on this earth realm, and Gaia is a spirit of relationships, of integrity and harmony and balance on this earth realm that we all live in. And she knows a thing or two about keeping things in balance. And so we ground into Gaia. You want to get very grounded when you're doing any kind of an energy reading. And then I will bring my, so you're going to drop those roots until you can really feel yourself kind of grounded. You can imagine the roots holding into a sphere at the center of the earth. If that's useful, or if you have a different image, you can use that. And I'm going to draw a little bit of that energy up into my body. Just sit with it. It feels so good to do it. And then I'm going to bring my attention to my crown, to the top of my head. And I'm going to open that space. And what that feels like is imagining light pouring, imagining a disc of light that is opening at the top of your head. And my intention when I arrive here is I'm opening up to spirit of highest love, light, wisdom, vibration, whatever your word for it, God, source, spirit, the universe, the cosmos, the divine, the sacred, it doesn't really matter, right? But something that you feel comfortable with. But I open up to that space, and you can feel it. You can feel that energy opening in the crown. And if any of you are artists out there, or you've ever just been in the flow with writing, or another activity, music making, etc., this will be a very familiar feeling for you. When you have ideas that are coming in, it feels like you're just running the energy. It's just coming in through the top of your head, the inspiration just coming out of you, right? This is what that energy feels like. It feels like welcoming in light, welcoming in space. And so we are opening up to spirit. And then I always ask for an auric shield of protection. That might sound a little bit cheesy to some people, and I'm a pretty practical person, but I have learned to not ever skip this step. And so I ask for this space to be protected from anything that is not love, that is not light, that is not truth, and that is not of highest benefit and highest service to the person that I'm reading for today. And if you want to call an archangel or a goddess or some kind of protector, a jaguar or whatever, to be, to hold that, if that's useful for you, great. If you just want to ask, to set that intention. And again, what are we really doing? we're setting an intention that we're going to keep this space clear of our judgment. We're going to keep this space clear of jumping to assumptions, of having a negative response to any of the imagery or anything like that we see. So essentially this work shield is we are protecting that space, right? Keeping it a nice clean workspace. And, you know, on a more esoteric tip, I guess all of this is a little bit esoteric, but you know, there are unpleasant energies out there in the universe, right? So, you know, in people, in the world at large. And so I make this request and I find it useful. And I always recommend when I teach this skill, please don't skip this step. You know, can't hurt, will help. Okay, now that I'm there, and again, this whole process takes like a minute and a half, maybe a minute, is that you root into Gaia, opening up to spirit, the eyes are closed, you're asking for shield of Auric protection, and then you're asking, what it is my intention to read for Tatiana today? What would be most beneficial for Tatiana to see and hear right now? And then I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna sit in receptive space and I'm just gonna receive. And people receive this information in different ways. As you practice this, it will really blow your mind how clearly some of this stuff comes through. For me, it's a little bit like a film with running commentary, imagery and commentary. For some people, it's all commentary. It comes in your own voice, unfortunately. It's not narrated by Morgan Freeman or David Attenborough, which would be so lovely. But it comes to you in your own voice. And I think that's important because a lot of people will hear the messages through their own voice and think, well, I'm just making this up, right? But who else's voice would it come through as, right? So, you know, there's a lot of trust and receptivity that is required to do this. And that is the thing that usually trips people up. But again, if you just practice it and you learn to trust this and you follow this process through, it will serve you, you will get good at it, and it's just such a sweet thing to do. Okay, so being in receptive mode, which means you sit and you wait. You've asked the question. We are not out there, you know, with a bow and arrow charging after the information. We're not going and getting wisdom. We're just sitting, and we're in empty space, and we've asked a question, and we're going to wait. You don't usually have to wait too long. I love it when people with lots of enthusiastic energy come in for a session because their energy just kind of like tumbles up. It's great. But sometimes you do have to wait a little bit, and especially when you first get used to this method, you might wait. And that can be for a lot of reasons, but just sit with it and wait. And so the idea is to then take great notes, right? And again, you are just taking notes of the weather. You're not judging, you're not making meaning, you're not doing anything. There is a bird. It seems to be blue. It's going from the west to the east. It's a little bit sad. It seems to be carrying a brick. Why is this bird carrying the brick? I might ask that question, right? What's the general feeling I'm getting here? Oh, I notice that my throat chakra is getting a little bit scratchy. I'm going to write that down because we've opened sacred space. So everything that happens in this during this time frame until you close the reading is going to be significant. If 10 people knock at my office door while I'm doing a reading, I might write down constant interruption. Is that a thing, right? So this will all become part of the reading. And I set a timer because it can just go on and on and on forever. And then I ask the question, I follow the energy, and I bring it to a close. I take the notes. I don't analyze the information while I'm receiving it. I don't assign meaning to the information when I'm receiving it. We do this after the tune-in process. Why? Because you're using a different part of you, of your consciousness, your cognition, of your senses to take in this information. And as soon as you get into analytical mode, you're like shifting yourself out of that, right? So when we're analyzing, we're not receptive, right? We're doing, we're active, we're yang. And so we want to sit in more of a yin and more of a lunar space in this receptive mode. And so take notes. And if you've got sunglasses on and, you know, it's a little bit kind of trancy to be in this space, your notes might be messy. You might have to go back and clean them up afterwards. No, that's fine. You might make a little sketch of something that you see as you're moving through it. And then you close the space and I close this reading, and everybody will get a PDF on exact instructions, so you don't have to worry about remembering all of this, but I want to run you through it. And then you close the space. I close this space. I disconnect from the energy of this person. I clear any energy that is here, that is not of highest love, light, wisdom, and vibration, anything that is not mine. They are back in my energy. I'm back in my own energy. Thank you, Gaia. Thank you, Spirit. This reading is closed, right? Okay. And you might do a little smudge and clear the space. I recommend that too. Again, this whole process can be very, very, very quick once you practice it. Now, once we've closed the reading, now you get to analyze. You're gonna go over the notes and generate a good story from it. So you might fill in, bring a little bit of sentence structure. You don't want to change anything that you've received to make it more likable or whatever. You want to report the news as it is, right? But you want to generate a good story. And what is a good story, right? So in the case of the woman with the different faces that she's moving through, the different identities that she's really struggling with, a good story would involve her. A good story has choice. It has some compassion. We're not judging her, right? Notice that I write we see, not I see, you are this is happening to you, etc. We see, the woman is, right? You want to present it in as a narrative that the person can sit outside of. If we're saying you, that's hard to do. So the woman, right? The bird, right? Etc. And so the idea is that a good narrative has some good descriptive imagery, some good questions about what that might mean, and then some space so that we can take a look at things in different ways, and then a little bit of catharsis at the end of it, right? So that's in a nutshell. If all of this sounds complicated to you, it won't be once you start doing these. Once you start practicing with these, you'll be like, oh my God, this is really interesting, and that I can do this, right? Something comes into the mind's eye. I don't judge it. I don't say, I don't know what that pink blob is. I'm going to write down pink blob, right? Inconclusive pink blob, right? Makes me feel a little bit uneasy, right? Etc. etc. I'm not going to discard imagery that I don't understand. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to figure out how this fits into a story. I'm going to present this to the client. I'm going to say, let's talk about this story. What is going on in your life that this is speaking about, right? I've never had anybody say, in years, I've been doing this for many years, I've never had anybody say, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? So, but I do get a lot of tears of recognition, right? One, just that sense of, to be able to get at the thing, right? At the thing can be really cathartic in and of itself, right? That can be such a huge relief for people. So that's the tune-in, or in shamanic practice, we call this tracking the energy. And if you follow these steps and you practice and you do one of these a day, over time, this muscle just gets so strong. It really does. And all sorts of interesting things. You want to notice body sensations that are happening. If there's disruption outside, if you start to get really hot and really anxious, right? Sometimes you'll feel some of the emotional content. Again, don't judge it, take a note, right? Take notes of it. What I recommend for everyone in starting to use this skill is a minute. Do it for 1 minute, set your timer, get one image, one quick image, one phrase, whatever it is that comes in that minute, write it down. And then the question, once you're practicing with yourself doing this method, is going to be, what might be useful for me to see and contemplate today? A goose, I will take it, right? A goose, okay, right? And then, sitting with that image and watching what happens during the day. How is that meaningful? And, then it sends us on a little bit of a wild goose chase, haha. If we're wanting to look into the symbolic elements of what it is that we're seeing. How do we do that? Well, you can use Google, the great oracle, should you like. I have a book that is really wonderful. I'm gonna see this. It's called The Book of Symbols. It is a big, giant 800 pager. You can get it for, it'll shock you when you look, it'll say like $200 in some of the spaces online, but actually you can easily find it for about $30 to $40. And it has like every symbol you could ever imagine and a little bit of the history of the progression, right, of the evolution of that symbol in the human imagination. It's a great book. Also Ren Butler's, hold on one second, The Archetypal Universe. I don't know why that slipped to my mind. That's another one that's just so rich and evocative and really beautiful poetic meditation on dream symbols, etc. And all of the astrological planetary pairings. It's a really beautiful book. That's a great one. However, we're very blessed to, it's a blessing and a curse. We live in a time where you can look up any symbol, right? And get at least a little bit of information on it if you get stumped, right? So, and what do I mean by symbol? I mean everything in the reading. Are we on a desert? Because a desert is a landscape without water. And what is water about? Ooh, water, emotion, right? Relational connection, feeling satiated, right? On an emotional sense, our intuitive, our lunar, right? So what is water about, right? Why are we in a desert? How is that relative to this person? And the desert taking up a huge space in the reading. Okay, well, then we know that we're talking about earth element and earth. This earth element is like the practical, the 3D, what we're doing on a day-to-day. And, so a desert might speak about this, there's a lack of emotional satisfaction or satiation, right, in what's happening in the 3D, material realm, right? Again, I'm just kind of rambling off a few things just to give you an idea of how this works. So even without going and looking it up, because again, there's some great resources out there online, and there's also a ton of junk, right? You look up woodpecker and it's like, you will die from a stab wound, it's nonsense. So use your discretion, right? Feel into it. Does that feel meaningful to you? Very often when you're reading for another person, the symbol might be very meaningful for them, right? And you wouldn't have guessed that. So that's why we make the meaning together. But in a nutshell, feel into what these symbols are, right? If it's a bird, what do birds do? What kind of bird? What color is it, right? Is that related to a chakra? What information might be there? Birds fly. Is that function impaired? Is the bird doing what it usually does? Does the bird seem well? Up in the air element, air is about consciousness, right? And communication and perception. And how might that be relative, right? So we're looking at all of the different elements and we're piecing together a story, right, out of the tapestry of the elements. And to do this piecing together is really, really, really satisfying. And you will find it meaningful. You will find that you get meaningful stuff when you're doing your readings, right? It's not junk. And why? Because we've opened sacred space, right? The intention is to connect into another person's energy who has asked for us to. They've opened that channel. And we're just taking a peek in that space. So whatever you get, consider it relevant, even if you don't understand or it seems a little bit ridiculous, right? And the ridiculous stuff can be a lot of fun too. I had a client, I wasn't going to include this in her reading because I thought I don't know what that's about. It was a lizard on a skateboard. And I thought that seems a little bit silly to open a reading with, but I did include it. And she said, oh, that's my partner. he's that's him kind of in a nutshell, right? So it might not make sense to us. We might think it's silly, but it can be very meaningful to the person that you're reading for. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, before we go into creative agility, That was just a big bunch of info that I dumped on you. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything that they want to say? I don't really know what you're talking about there. Can you please clarify? Anybody got anything for me? No, everybody's good. That makes sense. Wonderful. That's so great. Okay. Yeah. Everyone's still here. I haven't scared anybody away. Great. And also you can just kind of like show a hand, like, can everybody see that that would be useful in a session to do a piece like that, right? To be able to construct some sort of a mythic narrative and why that might be meaningful, right? Yeah. And also how tying astrology into that is not like that also seems like a pairing that makes a lot of sense since we're dealing with archetypal elements in a reading. You know, another way that we can think about this, actually, I just mentioned Ren Butler's book, is that you can think about this mythic narrative as like sharing a waking dream, a lucid dream with somebody, right? It has that quality too. That's another way to think about it, right? Okay. So now we get the story, you get to practice with that. And I think what I'll do, just because of time's sake, maybe I'll let everybody do this to take a moment after this session is finished tonight. And before you go to bed, drop your roots into Gaia, make a little sacred space, right? If you don't have any smoke, just walk around your room in a counterclockwise direction and say, I clear the space of anything that is not highest love, light, truth, you know, whatever your words are for that. And drop your roots into Gaia, open up to spirit, ask for a shield of Auric protection, and ask for something that might be meaningful for you to have for the next day, a symbol. And write it down, sit with it, see what happens, okay? What I suggest with this practice is that you start doing really short tune-ins. I would do it for about a month. Do it every day. I'm a big fan of consistency. It's just like practicing music, right? Or a dance sequence, right? I know Tatiana is a dancer, right? Or if you're working on a musical piece, right? If you practice it every day, you start building exponential capacity, right? For the learning, it really, really takes off. It's just like working a muscle, right? And everybody has these muscles. I've had people in the past say, "Oh, my third eye is closed." Everybody's third eye is a little bit open, right? And you know, the crown a little bit open. Nobody's chakras are completely shut down. They're all working a little bit, right? Some might be under functioning, but allow yourself to have trust and faith that this is a space that you can get information and you can begin to build a relationship with this space over time. So I would say a month, maybe if you're doing like 5 tune-ins a week, and again, they're just 1 minute. The whole thing takes you about 5 if you clear your space, sit down, put your sunglasses on, do your thing, close it down after a minute. Why don't do it for longer to begin with? Because it would be very overwhelming. You can get really spaced out afterwards and it can be exhausting. So build it over time. Again, you don't go to the gym and pick up like 300 pounds, right? You go to the gym and you pick up like 5 and then you work your way up. So this is like that. And also you can get so much information that it doesn't make any sense and it feels confusing. So I like to start with short periods of time, a very small imagery set that you can sit with, you can let it cook. You can, and what I mean by that is you can just let yourself, you can let that show up. You can connect what it is that you're receiving to what's going on in your life, okay? And again, too much information equals chaos, right? And so start small and then build over time, right? Or maybe you're doing, the first couple of weeks you're doing 1 minute, and then by the end of the month you're working up to 3 minutes, right? I do 40. And it's really fun when you can build up your capacity to do longer readings because you just get, I mean, you're really going on a journey. You're doing some travel, right? And you can get a lot of information. You can ask questions in there. If it comes too quickly, the information, say, please slow down. Who are you talking to? Spirit, cosmos, the divine, what you are communicating with. I will say that's coming too fast. Please slow it down. I didn't understand that. Please give me a different image that I do understand, right? You want to be careful with that one, that you actually don't understand it, and not that you're being intuitively lazy. So you want to give yourself some time with this and work up to longer readings over time. Start with yourself. It's harder to read for yourself than it is for others. Why? Because we're not objective about our own stuff, right? We're not neutral. So we want to see certain things. We will judge. We do discard. And so it takes a bit more focus to remain in that space, to remain in a neutral space. But practice with yourself first. And if you're feeling like getting the hang of it, grab a friend, and preferably somebody who's working with this method. But you can read for your loved ones in this way and try it out and see how it's meaningful. And it's great because it will build your confidence over time. I teach 6-month courses where we do this and a whole variety of other skills to be able to build this kind of work. And I get the students, the participants, to trade with each other and work with each other. And it's so neat because you don't need the physical person to be sitting in front of you. You can read for anyone, anywhere in the world. I just need a name and a direct request. And I can work off of that, and so can you. Okay. Yes, so that's the format for that. You'll get a PDF so that you don't have to remember it all. But I really encourage you to play with this if this is resonant to you and speaks to you. The other thing that is important in the context of this for you, whether you're practicing astrology or any other form of counseling or any other form of divination, or just to support yourself, is that when difficulty arises, checking in this focused way, checking in sacred space, and asking yourself the question, asking spirit the question, what is this really about? What do I need to see that I am not seeing here, right? Can be so helpful to develop that. One of the consistent comments I get from students is that, oh, wow, that saves me a lot of time. I've been struggling with that for a long time, and I can see it really clearly now, right? And once you see it, you can address it, right? So it can shorten the unnecessary suffering duration, right? Of just sitting with stuff. Not that we want to always push ourselves or others out of suffering. Sitting with difficulty is really helpful, right? It's really, really helpful. And so we want to do that, but if we can get at the quick of something, right? And then it can be beneficial to do so. And for a client, right, that's in a lot of distress, we want to be efficient in the work that we're doing with people, right? So if people are coming for relief, we want to be able to be efficient in that. Okay, the next little bit, this is really fun, creative agility. And so everything that we just talked about is creative, right? And the cool thing, so the course that I teach is called High Sense Perception and Creative Process. And I sandwich those two things together because if I can get people making art, I can get them reading energy. Why? Because it's the same feeling, right? Anybody who is an artist, right? I'm going to use Tatiana again, like if you dance and you go out into a blank room and you start to move, right? There is a sense of running the energy through you, running the energy. You are open and you are moving, right? Something is moving through you, right? If you make art, if you make music, those moments where we are open and we are able to translate that. And so this is exactly the same function that we are using when we're doing a tune-in, right? When we're doing divination work. And you're going to find that it makes you a good astrologer. You sit down with a chart and you're in that sacred space and you're used to opening up and being able to see the symbolic elements of things and honing in and getting a sense for where that is. It can really support that practice as well. I have found that it has helped me a lot. And so creative agility, right? So I think that maybe in celebration of Jupiter being in Pisces for this last little bit before it comes back into Pisces in the winter in 2022. You know, celebrating our creative process, right? The part of us expanding and having some faith and taking a journey and making time and space to play and develop our creativity. Why? Not just so that you can do divination work, right? But so that you can show up to life flexibly, creatively, so that you have choice, right? So one of my mantras for my practice and also in my session with clients is I choose creativity in the face of limitation. And occasionally that's gotten me into some trouble, but like always interesting trouble. But this concept is that most of the time when people come for assistance, they're stuck, right? Stuck. What does stuck mean? Out of options. I don't know, right? I can't see my way forward. I am caught between a rock and a hard place. I feel like I've got an impossible choice to make, right? I've got some mutually exclusive beliefs going on and I don't know how to get out of that, right? All of that at its core is a creative issue, right? Is that if we only see two choices and they're both terrible and they're both painful and they're both unacceptable, we need another choice. And in order to open up space for new choice, we need creativity. And as we said before, for ourselves and for others, when we are, if we are upset, stressed out, in trauma, right, disturbed in some way, our creative functions are not working all that well. And so it is highly useful to develop the skill so that it operates, it's got a little bit more grunt for those times when it gets knocked around by life. And for clients, we need to help them access that creativity that is in them so they can see that they have choices, they have options, they have other ways that they can view the current situation, they have other ways that they can see themselves, they have other stories that they can put together about who they are, right? Our lives are the stories that we tell ourselves about us, about others, about our limitations, about what's available to us, about what's not, right? About what we deserve, about the world, about justice, about injustice. We run these stories over and over and over. We run them subconsciously, right? We pick them up from our formative experiences and through the stuff that happens to us in life. And so being able to creatively interfere, it's kind of a Uranian thing, right? Like that trickster energy, like infiltrate some of those storylines that are not particularly kind, productive, compassionate, supportive. We need some creativity. We need to open those spaces up and give those stories some other places to move, places that are supportive instead of suppressive. So we need creative agility. And this practice is a lot of fun, right? So essentially what I mean by this is flexing your creative muscles, doing it in a whole variety of ways, and doing it regularly. And I think that it's one of, you know, the big pieces that we've lost in the face of capitalistic, you know, patriarchal culture, is this creating for creating's sake, creative play, you know, a focus on play, you know, that being the thing, one of the things that gets shoved to the side because there isn't enough time, right? So let's reclaim that, right? Jupiter and Pisces would agree. Let's reclaim that. Let's bring back imaginative play and bless those spaces where we are able to work that creative process and where we are able to be open and doing things, working creatively in a way where we're playing at stuff and we're experimenting, not for any other reason than for kicks, right? Than for fun and for exploration. So I recommend that you make a time once a week or more if you like, where you do a little bit of creative exploration. You do not need to have any art skills, any creative skills whatsoever to do this. You are innately creative by virtue of being, you know, here, this soul in this human body. You are a work of art already. You are creative. so everybody can create. And this is not about making art really, right? As much as it is about creative experimentation and having, allowing yourself to move energy creatively around and develop those faculties. So make space and time every week that you do it. Maybe you sit down on a Sunday afternoon for, you know, an hour or two. And I like to make an actual space. If you make the space, something will happen in it. Set up a space in your house or somewhere where you've got a few materials, maybe a few cheap paints, you know, something to write with, a variety of papers, maybe some things to collage with, a bit of sculpting clay, which you can get, it's cheap, right? You can get a block of sculpting clay for $10. Some beads, you know, anything that you can think of, some feathers, get some stuff from outside, some stones, and just put it on your desk and get into the habit of going there regularly or whenever you have an issue, and start playing around with stuff. Start letting yourself see what colors you're drawn to, what materials you feel like messing around with. Do you feel like ripping paper? Do you feel like stacking, you know, your erasers? Start arranging things, and just without any agenda, make bad art. So I went to art school in my 30s, and it was the most fun thing that I've ever done. I think I was the most enthusiastic person there. And I learned, I've got a really good story about learning to make bad art. You know, when I went there, I was like really concerned with wanting to make beautiful things, and so worked really hard on my projects. And you know, one of the best lessons that I had is I was in a sculpture class, and it was the first sculpture class that I had taken, and the professor asked us all to get a giant hunk of clay, and then we had a couple weeks to work, and then we had to make something. Everyone's like all into their clay, myself included, like trying to make something like really great and really impressive. And so people are working around the clock, and it comes to the day where we get to critique them, and oh, everybody's so proud, look at this magnificent sculpture. And the professor's like, great, pick up your sculptures and take them out back and heave them in the dumpster, right? And everyone's like, what? I was going to give that to my mother, I was going to whatever, right? And everyone's horrified. And his point was, and he made everybody do it. He said, well, you can keep it, but you will fail this assignment. And the purpose is that you have to be willing to free up your process, right? If you make things in a way where it's okay to put them in the dumpster, where when they're done, it's okay to toss it out. You are free, right, to make things in a whole variety of ways. And so I tossed my sculpture in the dumpster, and I spent, you know, probably the next year making truly terrible art and having so much fun. But it really opened up my creative process. It opened up space in my relationships. It opened up space in my practice. It was just so helpful for me. And so be willing to make bad art, right? You want to do a good session for somebody as an astrologer, be willing to do a shitty session, right? It's that on the way there, be willing to do a mediocre job, be willing to try a few things out and have them not go well, right? And so in your art making processes, you know, and I can remember some really great nights, you know, up all night and you're making something and the sun's coming up and you look at it and you're like, my God, it's horrible, right? Like what a gong show that thing is. But it's the involvement in the process. It moves the energy. It starts to connect things that we wouldn't normally connect. And that's really important in life in general, for our well-being in general, for the child that is inside of us, all of us, right? For the part of us that really needs to play. And also in those areas in our life where we're working with other people, where we're wanting to help people connect the dots, et cetera, and solve problems creatively and make space for themselves. Okay, so experiment all the time. Pick up materials that you don't even know what they are and just start messing around. And you know, bring a creative approach to unlikely places. That's the last slide that I'm going to finish on because I think everybody will find it funny. Ingest art, right? Go and listen to poets. Go and check out plays and watch dance. And, you know, I love the Fringe Festival if you're in a place where that's an option, because it's just a bunch of people trying stuff out, right? They're not polished pieces, and there's great stuff there, and there's stuff that doesn't really work, but what you see is the spirit of people creatively playing, and some real genius and some really wonderful connections can come from that. And that's what we're looking for, connections and catharsis, right? In all places, at all times, connection and catharsis. Okay, so ingest art, allow yourself some creative abandon. Let yourself make lewd art, ugly art, atrocious art, right? Art that doesn't work, impractical things, right? Let it be a place where you actually get to have a bit of wilderness and see what happens in your life. Okay, so I'll end on this slide, which is to bring a creative approach to unlikely places. It was a project that I was working on, and it was this, I won't go into it, but it was a big giant sculpture project. It was all made out of steel. It was a bit of a nightmare. And this angle grinder was, I used an angle grinder and a welder for this giant project. It was the only two tools that I used, and a pipe chain breaker. And this broke, and I was so, the angle grinder broke. I was so frustrated because it was like the tool. It was one of the three things that I was using to make this project. And I remembered that my mantra is I choose creativity in the face of limitations. So I made a funeral for it. Some of the other people in the building came to the funeral. We gave it its rights. We thanked it for its service. It has the gloves there, and made the little cross and gave it a little halo. And we've transformed a broken angle grinder into something of the sacred, right? So, you know, make that art, make it everywhere that you can. Try to bring a creative approach to everything. And I choose creativity in the face of limitation. That will serve you in your astrological practice. It will serve your clients. It will serve you in your life. And it's just it's a more fun way to live. It's a more freeing way to live. So that's the talk that I have for you. I hope that was helpful tonight. And again, this concept is, these are supports for your astrological practice, because I know this is Astrology Victoria. These working on your creative agility and intuitive development so that you can work with this mythic narrative stuff, it will bless your astrological process. It absolutely, or your practice, right? And your learning process. It really, really will. It's such a wonderful support. Yes, okay, so I will stop yapping. Thank you everybody so much for listening, and I'll make sure that Tatiana has some PDFs of a few of the things that we've hit on tonight. So if you want to think about it further, if you want to go through and use any of the processes, you've got a few PDFs to support you. Yes, okay, so thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gretchen. That was phenomenal. Like, we would like to now, like, ask people if you have questions or comments about this. Whoa, this is, I mean, I have a lot to say, but I'd like to hear everybody else what they have to say, if there's any questions or comments.
My only comment is I can hardly wait to try the little experiment.
Oh, I love it. Yes, that's the spirit that we're looking for. I love it. Yeah, great.
And you know, I'm frequently frustrated. You know, I took up watercolors during COVID and stuff, and I'm frustrated because I tend to want to make it look realistic. And so I'm also going to try your approach and go find miscellaneous materials and see what I can do, just stacking them or placing them or arranging them, and see how I feel about that.
I love that, Kathy. And you know, one thing that I have a lot of fun with, and I get students to do it in my classes, because I give a lot of art projects for homework, and it's really fun homework, is to work on mandalas using natural implements. So go outside, get stones, get sticks, get petals, get whatever you can find, start in the center. And the idea is to work in a circle and do whatever you feel like doing. And it's such a neat process. You get so lost in it. And people have made some beautiful things over the years, right? Out of just stuff they find in their kitchen. You know, I've had somebody do it out of trash, right? And like a beautiful mandala. So that idea of taking things and just starting to mess with them. Good. I love it that you're into it, Kathy. That's great.
Yeah, they did that. I was camping at Rath Trevor Provincial Park on the island here, and there were a bunch of kids playing, and they had done, I didn't realize what they were doing, but there was that assembly of pine cones and bark and twigs and all kinds of stuff. And I guess they had just a fantastic time picking it all up and then assembling it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, I had one student do it with spices. She took paprika and turmeric and all these different colored spices, and because she was at home, and she's like, well, the good news is I made a really cool mandala, and the bad news is I'm totally out of spices. They're all on my floor.
That's all right. They were all dried out anyway.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I think this frees up like that inner child that it's, you know, longing for that, you know, expression of self, right? And it's funny because I do have a little bit what Kathy says, like when I make art, I want it to be so beautiful and perfect, you know, and of course it's funny when you bring all this up, like just create, it doesn't matter, because I do have this very Virgo side to me, which one that wants so perfect things. And if they're not delivered, 10th house Virgo perfectly delivered with Saturn there is like, you know, Saturn, Mercury, and everybody else perfectly delivering something perfect. And it's hard because then this is a big lesson for me to be okay with the messy process. It's like, it's okay, right? And
yes. Yes. I feel you. I've got a stellium in Virgo. I've got Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in Virgo in the 11th, but it's opposing Venus in Pisces in the 5th. And that tension for me is like, and again, like even to shuffle through some of this stuff, like I like a good detail, you know, like but I've learned that it's okay to have, so one way that you can work with it too, Tatiana, is that you can have spaces as well where you're like, okay, I'm going to do a Virgo project. I'm going to let my Virgo run wild here. And you give it, you know, you can have that really complex, detailed perfection project, but then you also have all the time for the messy, right? And I just think that you find that they really help each other out so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do have, my Venus is a 12th house Venus, so it's certainly connected to, you know, and I have this moon Neptune trine. So there's a lot of that, like I relate to you a lot in that sense that when you open the gates of creativity, they're just open. However, the Virgo, and I do feel having so much Virgo, sometimes we can be very analytical, especially with that Mercury there. And then even reading charts, sometimes, and this happened to me the other day, and it was like, what happened? Like the gates closed. I did not do the tuning because I think I'm going to start doing that every single time. That's like precious, because I was like, okay, I trust that every time I'm going to read, it's like I can see everything, and like the archetypes just come to life, and I just get it very clearly when I talk to the clients. But the other day, I don't know what happened. I would see the symbols and I didn't understand anything. I couldn't understand. I was like, what happened? I don't understand what anything means. And I was completely like, and there are the clients there. I'm like,
you're like, I don't know, it's just a lot of information. Yes, I feel you. Yes. Oh my gosh. And it's so tough, right? And it's such a panic, right? That idea of I am here to make all of this complexity somewhat understandable to you, and I have no idea. Yeah.
So I think this is awesome as to resort to when you're analytical, more clear, bullet pointed informational session is not there, and then you need an outlet. To get into feeling what things feel like and start asking the personal questions and yeah, totally. When I was like blocked, I was like, what do I do in that case? Because again, I'm beginning to practice now more and more with clients, and every client is different. Some clients I'm completely like tapped in, and it's like I can see everything. It's like almost alive. It's so easy to see the story, the patterns, and then it's closed. However, I do feel that when we're blocked, and this is why I think the tuning is a wonderful, wonderful tool, because sometimes we're just blocked before, like for whatever reason. And that day I was not, I was not connected basically, and that showed in the reading. So I ended up delivering like so much information just out of blah 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 blah.
You're like, oh, I just want to give you something, and I know that some of it will be meaningful. Yeah, it's totally
And
one
I
of the.
horrible because I was like, I hope something like, but they were like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
uh.
And sometimes we can really doubt ourselves as well too. And I think that, it's and that doubt is tough, right? I think that always, and especially when you're beginning a practice, we're hyper vigilant around, because we're not in that space where we can totally trust. Hey, I like at this stage, so I'll say it in this way, in two things. One is that I've learned over the years that one, especially if I start to panic or feeling closed, I will ask the client, do you feel a little bit closed? Like, where are you feel like I'll ask them questions. I'll ask them what's going on in their life. I'll ask them where it is that they're feeling the tensions in their life, in their body. And asking some of those questions is a great way to get some of the dialogue going on. I find that if I am a little bit tripped up, one, I might be picking up on the client's energy, and so I will ask. Right? I mean, sometimes it's like, no, you didn't sleep last night, and or I didn't sleep last night, and I'm late, and that's why I feel a little bit frazzled. But sometimes, if I've had a perfectly good morning and I sit down, and all of a sudden I feel stifled and I feel anxious, I'm like, I'm reading for somebody, and this is a space that we're sharing. Do you feel a little bit stifled? Do you feel a little bit blocked? And I will tell you, it is 99.9% of the time, a client will say, I am feeling that way. That's exactly how I'm feeling. I feel very stifled. I feel like it's all very closed and I can't kind of see. So sometimes you're picking up on the client's energy. And so there's that. And then there's also, I do a good way to kick things off is just even getting the person to start talking about what I always ask, what's going well for you and what's not going so well for you. And if they're in my office, I'm going to notice what the body's doing. And I might, as they're talking about something they're having trouble with, I might ask, where do you feel that difficulty in your body, etc. And just get them to kind of tune into the body. So again, it brings us both into the present moment. And then as we start to unfold in this way, it's like you can pull the chart in right at any point, right? So I love to ask those questions, and that idea of having, for every astrologer or a diviner or a counselor, it's good having a contingency plan. What happens if I freeze? Okay, this is the protocol that I use, right? These are a few things that I can do. Yeah,
I use
do sometimes, right? We just do. We're human beings.
something I use to for example, when I'm reading like the basics like sun, moon, rising, because I always kind of start with those like the elements and then sun, moon, rising just as a basic entry. Personality, I have this drawings that I made for the archetypes. I made the 12 signs, and I ask the client, I start with the with the rising, and I say, well, what do you see? And usually it's funny because
I love that.
I made the archetype based on all the information that the archetype has, but the client has their own. It's funny how each client sees what they want to see out of the archetype. And I kind of latch onto that to help them see, and then I ask them if that resonates with them. And I feel that using images like support images that are kind of pre-made of the archetypes helps them enter in that. That's something I'm finding, that it's a great way for me to not necessarily be locked into the information that I know, the cookbook recipe, is, well, this is the archetype, but what do you see there? And so
Totally.
a big project of creating like all the archetypes, basically, like all of them eventually. Maybe we can.
I love that.
Maybe we
I
can.
love that. I love it. Like, I love,
Yeah.
You know, and I love as well too, like I think that a lot of that piece as well is if we put something here, and in many ways that becomes its own archetypal story that you're connecting into. You're giving an object, can we move around this? And then I can get a sense of how you move around things, right? And, you know, and I think that in some ways that function of oracle cards is kind of like that a little bit as well, right? Is that here's an image, like let's connect into this. Let's explore what we're seeing and what you're picking up. How do you feel about this? What's your response? Yeah, I love that. That's great that you made art of all of the archetypes. That's so wonderful.
Well, I want to work on all of them, and if you are interested in collaborating, I'm more than open, because it's a lot of archetypes, and the idea is I want to create the whole, like at least the digital deck to be able to work with clients when yeah, exactly, when you're, because when I see a chart, I see there's a lot of information. It's too abstract sometimes, and it's difficult to get all that. So when you can kind of pull, like, what does, I don't know, Venus Jupiter mean, you can actually take Venus Jupiter and see, this feels like this, or this is the image connected to it, and it's like, and I feel that stays, that really stays.
Yeah, and I love the idea too of, and as even, you know, as a dancer, you know, it can be quite amazing too if there was, let's just say, you know, a short vignette of dance to express each one of the archetypes, right? That would be so cool too, right? Where you have like a little minute or, you know, 30 seconds of movement that kind of, you know, shows what that is about. I just think so many possibilities. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's very, when we use like creativity, instead of being so clinical. I mean, I don't know, you as a Virgo as well, like having so much Virgo energy, it's like we tend to like that polished, you know, things, and that things should make sense.
Yes, but it's funny because I also have, you know, I have a very highly aspected Uranus, and I've got my Sun and my Mercury in Aquarius, and it's like it drives my Virgo crazy because I'm disorganized, and I have a bad relationship with time, and like there's just a lot of different ways in which I would like to be a better perfectionist, but I'm just too disorganized for it. Like I just have to like battle that out in some way. Yeah. So yeah, but I love that, the idea of finding ways, and for everybody here, right, that idea of, or anybody who's listening to this, is having some of those things that you can pull out in your sessions, because what I find is that sometimes it's all about the astrology and sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes it's really doing a lot of intensive counseling around one piece, right? One piece for them. And all of that information in the chart, while relative, is there's one thing that they really want to talk about, right? And we can draw those things in, but just again, that flexibility, right? That agility is that sometimes we're giving lots of information. And some people love that, right? I have clients who want that. They want like bullet points of like information, right? And other people who can't take in a session like that at all. And so that ability to be able to be flexible and to be creative is so important. To be supple in our Venusian, Neptunian, Mercurial stuff, right? Yes. All right. Well, we've lost all our people.
Yes,
everyone's gone to bed because it's late, and I'm sure that Tatiana I can go on forever and ever, but
But this is probably seen by many people in the channel, so hopefully you know, this now will be on YouTube forever.
Hooray!
Who knows, maybe in 10 years there's gonna be somebody watching this and learning from precisely somebody that wants to get up, specifically astrologers or anybody who wants to counsel and have tools. I feel these tools are awesome because I feel what it does, it takes the pressure a little bit out of you having to be precisely perfect and give the perfect reading, and it gives the process back to the universal psyche, to exactly what the person needs. And I think this is
Yeah.
a lot of astrologers, we get caught. It's like we might get caught and we gotta deliver the perfect reading instead of we have to help the client solve what's going on with.
Yeah.
And I think this is a wonderful process, at least using that. So it's amazing. So well, even though we lost the people that were here, and
but yeah, and I think as well too, you know, it's and for another time, right? But you know, there's a lot of different pieces. Like this is one piece that I do, but just even a background in crisis counseling and suicide intervention, like I learned a lot in that I use in my practice, and you know, some relevant kind of bullet points in there, maybe for another time. But you know, just that concept of having a lot of different ways to move, right? And we need that, and being open and knowing that I think that we have to get over the part of us that feels like we got to pony up the goods in a reading. I think it trips us up so much, you know, and recognize that, you know, whenever I sit down, and this might sound a bit cheesy to some, but I'm, you know, Spirit and I are one, we work as a team, right? My intention is to be a clear and useful channel for the person in front of me and whatever it is that they need. And if I find myself stressing or self-conscious or working a little bit too hard, I'm going to take a breath, I'm going to get a little bit more relaxed, and I'm going to ask a few questions until, you know, we find a bit of a natural flow.
yeah, and the last thing I wanted to mention was that we tend to forget as energy healers or practitioners, and in general, for anybody working with the psyche of others or energetic fields, we do tend to forget how I personally believe that it is so important to do the clearing before and after, and the shields and the or the intentional, because like you said earlier, like there are energies, whether, and this is not so woo, this is their reality beyond what we see. And there are things that, you know, we absorb, that get tangled, that get tied into our energy field. A lot of people that work with energy sometimes don't take, what I feel, the responsibility. I'm not in any way in particular, but even I have to like catch myself going like, yeah, I'm big on rituals, like big.
Yeah.
And you know, I host heart circles and rituals and meditations, and I am aware of how important it is to begin that space and to close it, because a lot of the times we get all wrapped up and we forget the closure and the detachment from the client.
Yes, and it's so it's so important, and you know, and that's one of the reasons that you have these gigantic burnout rates among social workers, you know, etc., and helpers of all kinds. Why? All, you know, if you go into a room after two people have had a fight in there, you can feel it. It is hot. The energy is sticky. It feels stressful. We have an immediate reaction to it, you know, and I have some clients leave and the room is peaceful and lovely and you know, and other times they've just unloaded a lot of stuff, and that's wonderful. That's what it's for. But we're going to need to clean the room, right? And because that's the purpose of a good session, is to bring that stuff up and out, right? So that it can move and to let that come up. And so, you know, again, it's like if you spend time with 5 people that are really angry, if you spend an hour with 5 people that are really angry, you know that after that you need to like walk it off. You need to have a drink of water. Maybe you need to go take a shower, right? Everybody, even from a non-woo perspective, is that the world is full of billions and billions of people's very complex emotional energy, which is often not very good, right? Like it's not very, you know, it's angry, it's frustrated, it's anxious, it's, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, that idea of the importance of resetting yourself, resetting the space for you, and then also for the next person that comes in the door, right? You want your space clean. And again, it's just easy to do. It can't hurt. It can only help. And I think that the proof is kind of in the pudding, right? Whether you're into the woo or not. if you physically clean a room and you vacuum it and you put on a nice scented candle, the room feels differently than if you were just working there all stressed out on a project, right? It's going to feel totally differently. And we all can connect to that. We know what that feels like. So that idea of energetic housekeeping is really important in doing session work. Otherwise, you just get run over by it. You'll get so exhausted. And I learned that the hard way early on, but it was from doing crisis counseling, right? I was just, everybody that I was talking with had such horrible stuff going on. It was like the worst things that human beings do to each other. And I didn't, I didn't always take the time. I was busy. I had other jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And, it'll just eat you alive, right? It just becomes too heavy. So those ways of being able to move energy, things get conjured up as people who are compassionate and sitting with another person. If somebody's in pain, we're going to have a response to that. We don't have to take it into the body, but we are sharing that emotional experience with that, right? So that's really important, to do the housekeeping, keep yourself well so that you can keep doing what you like to do. All right, we better close it down, Tatiana, because we'll be here all night, because I actually could talk to you for days and days and days and weeks and weeks. I love talking to you. Yeah, but thank you to everybody out there. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
It was Jessica. No.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much. So lovely to see you.
I really enjoyed being in your presence.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. That's so kind.
Yeah, and I hope that people that are gonna watch this in the future will get the value of how important it is what you have talked about today. Because a lot of us are healers, a lot of us are here to do that work for others, and I think all of it is just so valid. Different tools for different people for different things, and then having that, I would say, like you said, that spiritual house cleaning is very important. It's not necessarily always talked about, and I think within the things like astrology, it's very important to talk about these things too, because that they can be pushed. It can be very academic otherwise, and I think what you brought to us today is to have something different, a perspective, a tool to use, and in the end we're just helping people. That's what we do. We help guide people, so it's awesome.
Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to compliment you without reading your energy or taking over or empowering, but is that all right if I give you a compliment?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Thank you so much. Please do. I'll take it.
It's like, wow, just really impressed and blown away by your so many things. Like, you're just so refined. You're so gracious, humble. You're so experienced. Like, it just comes through so deeply. Your desire, your loving heart to heal yourself, and it's such a pleasure to be in somebody's space who not only, what occurs to me is having the mother archetype, the teacher archetype, like all these amazing mystic, you can teach intuition, and you're so clean. Like, you occur to me as somebody who really is a manifester and who consciously and intentionally brings that energy into your day-to-day, but bring it in such a practical and grounded way. And I've never been in anyone's presence that could demonstrate that so beautifully.
Oh God, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that's the nicest compliment anybody's ever given me. Thank you so much.
Really, I mean, you come as like the practical teacher that anyone could learn from, and yet you're explaining with such vocabulary, such articulation, eloquence is so beautiful and fluid and relatable, and yet it's detailed, and it's macro and it's micro. It's like so huge of a scale. The refinement, it's incredible. And the image I got was of like an emotional elevator. It's like you're so committed to connect with all human beings that you have I felt your presence, like your consciousness go deep into your root and then all up the chakras, so that you could connect at any level with any human being. It was like, whoa. Deeply, tuned into yourself and so committed to be clean that you can help others. It's very, very amazing. That's what I saw.
You might, for the first time, I feel like speechless. Thank you so much. That's so kind. Thank you so much. That's such a gift. Thank you.
You are,
And thank you for showing us the tuning process, because Jessica does a lot of tuning on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And by knowing that we all can access that with a very simple formula, and I love that you gave us that practical exercise, because it's, oh my gosh, we all can do it. And I was like, Jess, let's do this after we close the session. I want to practice, I want to practice.
Yes.
Yeah. So
You'll be great. You'll have all sorts of yummy, lush stuff to work with.
Thank you for coming and doing this with us, and bringing your wisdom, because this is what I feel like you bring true wisdom. I'm honored that you came on here to do this talk, and that it's going to be viewed hopefully by many other human beings. And Dulcie was not here today, our other co-host, but yeah, on behalf of Dulcie, I know we're like deeply appreciative, and hopefully you come back on the Zooms to give other talks in the future as this grows.
Oh my gosh. Yes, anytime. And we'll chat, we'll collaborate, we'll do some stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it was a pleasure. Honored to be here. Thank you. And thank you, Jessica. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Gretchen. You are amazing. And and for everybody watching, thank you so much for watching, for tuning in. You can also reach Gretchen. We'll put all the information in the description below of the video anyway. So if you want to contact Gretchen, and we'll put all the information, so you have a way to connect to her, to get a session or whatever you need. Yeah, and if you want to also make a donation for this participation, it's also going to be available in the description when we put this up. So thank you, Gretchen, so much, and blessings, and we'll see you very, very soon.
See you very soon. Bye, ladies.